My name is Vina, aka Miss WOCReader, and welcome back to my channel. So I've been seeing a lot of chatter lately about spice and YA. That's a very cyclical conversation. It comes around like every few months in the book community. There are a subset of adults who are like begging for spicy YA, and then you have people like, you don't need spicy YA, that's gross, da 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 da. But then some of those same people who are very vocal about that don't realize that they also kind of play into that without realizing, because we see the adults who, like, yes, they acknowledge YA is supposed to be for teens and this and that, but they are some of these books' biggest stands, and they are openly like fighting over, lusting over these YA book boyfriends too. So for me, it doesn't matter if the YA book boyfriend is 16, 17, 18, 19. They are still a teen. It is still a YA book. If they are the love interest for a YA, you as a grown-ass adult do not need to be gushing over them. It's weird to me. And I called it the Twilight Effect because I feel like I really didn't see it in full force until Twilight, when you had all these grown women, these mothers in particular, getting in on the trend, reading the books, and then lusting after Edward to the point where we ended up getting the adult fanfic spin-off sequel kind of situation with 50 Shades of Grey, where it was just like a smuttier Twilight. And it's been more acceptable since then to be an adult in the YA space. I know back when I was a teen, at the height of all of that, we thought it was weird that those mothers were trying to like infiltrate our spaces. We were like, you're too old to be reading these books. Now, whenever we bring up the conversation, there are a lot of people who will be like, I read YA because I'm trying to heal my inner child. I didn't get to read about black kids when I was growing up, or Latinx kids, or about gay kids, or insert whatever group they're talking about as a child, so I read it now as an adult. I understand that aspect, and I'm not saying completely wean yourself off of YA. I read some YA. I write YA. I'm currently working on a YA book, but I'm working on a YA book that is for a teen audience. Like, and writing this and crafting it in mind for teens to be able to read and identify with it. And I expect teens on the younger side to read it, because I know as you get older, you want to read more adult books. And so around like 16, 17, 18, you start wanting to read about people older than you, experiencing different things from you. I am writing my book in mind that it's going to be like the middle schoolers and early high schoolers who are going to be reading this book and identifying with it and like connecting with these characters. When I was a teen, like, it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I kind of want to read like a little bit more, like, we'll use spice for lack of a better term. So I ended up starting to pick up more adult books, because, you know, like, you have the kissing and the hugging, you might have some light description, like stuff you really thought was like hot at a teenage age, and then it's like, looking back on it with adult eyes, oh, actually that was pretty tame. And then like, you're like, I want to read a little bit more. I want to see like older people like living life, doing these things, because we're always in such like a rush to grow up and age until you actually age and find out that adulthood isn't anything. So like naturally there's that transition of, I'm going to pick up some longer books, some older books. I just want to see something a little bit different. A lot of teens I've talked to, like in recent years, they have kind of been skipping over YA. And I think part of the reason for that is just because it's become such a space where adults are writing, particularly adult women, because it's not really too much of a boy space. I know every time we bring up the conversation about boys and YA, for them, the conversation gets derailed every time, because people want to just bring all like general books into the conversation. They're like, well, men dominate this, and I'm like, but they're not really seen in YA. And so it's YA has become like a space for adult women to kind of relive their teenage fantasies. And as a millennial, I will say a lot of my peers have like a hard time moving on and growing up. Like, still want to hold on to the things from our childhood that brought us joy, especially because the world we live in is just a mess. And I definitely understand that part of it. Like, the whole wanting to heal your inner child thing, like, I get what people are saying, but it's really your current adult self that needs the healing. So holding on to things like that represent childhood to you is not going to heal your adult self. And we need to be mindful that teens deserve things too. Like, as a teen, I would not have wanted my mom to be in the same bookish space with me, reading my books and gushing about them. Like, that would have been so weird to me. And my mom and I, though we're both avid readers, we've actually never really been like readers of the same types of fiction. She had her books, I had my books. Our reading still to this day rarely crosses. And like, YA is supposed to be that space where like you're looking at people who are like your age or maybe like a little bit older than you, who you can like see these different experiences through, or maybe have the same feelings like you, or maybe you haven't gone through this yet, but it's just like a window into that. I remember too when I was in like elementary school and I was reading a lot of books, like the way in which books were marketed, like in which they were written, felt completely different. Like, I remember reading about teens, like 14, 15, 16 years of age in books, but these were books targeted towards 8, 9-year-olds. And now in like the publishing space, they feel like every character who is a teen or feels youngish has to be in YA. I think a good example of that is graphic novels. Like, so I read Ghost Rose. I also interviewed the authors if you guys want to check that out. But it is by Chanel Gibbs and Shanae Gibbs and Emily Cannon. This is a great book. This actually surprised me a lot because it's one of the few YA graphic novels that I had picked up where it actually felt like it was targeting a teen audience. Because I find as graphic novels continue to get popular and more publishers are trying to like jump in that space because they're just so much more accessible, it's hard to find that balance for the publishers of what actually is for that audience. Like, this had teenagers being teenagers. It's light and fluffy. There's like a dash of history in it. It's a ghost story. It's really cool. It's really fun. But I've read graphic novels where the characters were like 16, but they read like it reading level wise, it felt like elementary school. Like, nothing here they're dealing with is like deep teen issues. Like, this, it read like something I would have watched on Disney or Nickelodeon back in 4th grade. I actually gave those types of books to my now 11-year-old niece because I just felt like it satisfied that craving of wanting to see people who aren't like older and babyish in stories and feel like, oh, I'm reading something like for the big kids. But that stuff is being marketed towards like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and I'm like, yeah, the characters are the same age as them, but like the experiences in here are like very surface level. It's not really something that like they would be hooked on. And then we have like the ones that are being published, like adapted off of webtoons, where I feel like they are more adult nostalgia bait. And a lot of the things that they're referencing are like more adult nostalgia bait. And sometimes the characters aren't even in their teens. Sometimes they're in their like early 20s to mid 20s. But because it's a graphic novel, publishers automatically want to shove that in the YA space to target the, like, again, we're always saying like it's for this age, but it's really for the adult audience. And that's kind of weird too, because it's like saying adults can't read graphic novels and enjoy them because if like they feel young and fluffy and they're not heavy, then it's for a teen audience, which Wash Day Diaries was another good example of that. I recall like a lot of publications listing that as teen, and I'm like, these characters aren't teens. They're not going through anything that is like teen issues. Why are we calling it a teen book? I think epic fantasy is another one of those genres where the lines get blurred a bit, because, and I say this all the time, especially when we're talking about like new adult and stuff like that, most fantasy books feature characters who are on the younger side, whether it's in adult or it's in YA. That's why I've always asked the question of, okay, but what actually would make something new adult in that space? Because a lot of the denser fantasies that I've read had like 15, 16, 17-year-old characters fighting the world. Like, these teens in these books aren't going through the things that teens typically go through. And like there's like the answer harder fantasies people would just generally place in adult, but I'm like, what stops it from being YA? And nobody's really able to kind of answer that question. And then you have the YA ones like Children of Blood and Bone, for example. A lot of people were like, oh my gosh, they cast these grown people as the characters for the adaptation. Like, they're taking away the teen aspect of the book. I'm like, what about this was really teenish though? Like, the writing style was definitely more in line with YA epic fantasy versus adult fantasy in terms of like how the story was structured, the things that get focused upon, but nothing in here was particularly teenish, like as far as what the characters are actually going through. Like, the whole like idea of dealing with your parents' expectations. Your parents are going to have specific expectations on you for most of your life. A lot of us are adults still dealing with parental expectations. That doesn't automatically end at 18. In fact, it kind of increases, because then they have other expectations put upon you. And these kids in this book, they're dealing with war, they're dealing with death. Like, how many teens are gonna go hook up with the person responsible for burning down their village? Like, that's not a teen issue. Like, they're dealing with some heavy stuff that it's fun to read about, and it's really cool, and it's great to have these big stories for teens, but this is not necessarily like a story that hinges on the characters being like 16 and 17. Like, they can be like 20, 21, 22. It wouldn't really make much of a difference. And we kind of saw that too, I think, with like Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. For the longest time, I would see debates back and forth, or it'd be like, oh, they don't really read like teens, they don't really read like teens, and then people being like, yes, they're just teens who had to grow up faster. But then the show came out, and they kind of just felt like adults. And I know my mom was a fan of that show. She did not read the books at all, did not know they were based on books, still hasn't read the books to this day. She was just enjoying the show for what it is, as a fantasy show, and the teen part wasn't even like registering. So it's kind of interesting to see like what separates it from being teen versus adult. And a lot of times lately, it's honestly just been the publisher, because there's been some stuff in the past few years that has definitely been written as a YA, and when you read it, like, this was definitely YA, but adult publishers have ended up picking them up and publishing them. And so you go in expecting like, this is going to be like an adult story, and I'm like, oh, the characters are 17, they're busy making kissy faces during the battle instead of, actually fighting. It's weird, like, yeah, it's violent, but violent doesn't necessarily make it adult. I think sex doesn't necessarily make it adult. There was a period of time there where I felt like I was getting more sex in YA fantasy versus adult fantasy, because the adult fantasies I was picking up were just kind of like, yeah, they did it and like breezing through it, fade to black, whereas like YA fantasy was trying to make it like a little sexier until the line, and then you had some that were really going in there, and people were arguing, well, like teens have sex. Yeah, they do, but there's a way in which to write a sex scene in YA where I don't feel like a voyeur, like to some teens going at it. Like there's language you can use to like differentiate it between the language that we're seeing in adult books, and sometimes I do see it get blurred, and it feels a little weird. Like sometimes we have these books where they'll make the characters 18, 19 so that they can have them have like sex and have these like sexier scenes like in more detail, and I'm just like, why? Like there is a way to do it where they can still have sex and what their feelings, and it can read like something age appropriate. And also, there are a lot of adults, because they do make up so much of the readership of these books and the publishers are clearly targeting them. Like, we've seen the not safe for work YA art pop up here and there, like commissioned by the publisher or commissioned by the author the past couple of years. But we also see the adults just like thirsting over these YA love interests online. Like, again, I don't care if they are 17, 18, 19, it's still gross. And sometimes I read some of these books and they're written by women, and the way in which they talk about the love interest is a little much. Like, they are focused on their looks. I'm seeing a lot of, he looks like a grown-ass man, but he is still a boy type of wording, and like just harping on like his build and this and that. And I'm not saying teens can't look at each other's bodies or whatever, that's not what I'm saying, but it just feels like there's a lot of stuff written to kind of like, oh, it's okay for you as an adult to think this is like a very cute like boy. And I'm just like, because why is he clearly a boy but also looking like a grown man? Why are we saying that on page? I don't get it. And why am I seeing like adults at the forefront when it comes to the bookish content around these books, the ones squealing about these different ships? Because it's not just older ones, it's newer ships too, are women who are 25 plus, especially when we do have adult books to cater to them. Like, even more so than before, we have books that cater to them. Now, we are kind of in this romantasy era of publishers, and they're outright saying it, because I talked about it in a previous video with an article that was released. They're outright saying these books satisfy that need for YA but with sex, where we get these characters, they read just like these YA characters, very young, very naive, even though it doesn't make any sense that they're so naive, because most of them come from these backgrounds where it's like, all my life I had to fight, I was raised in the gutter, like, and they're supposed to be really street smart, and then they go to whatever destination they have to go to and they're dumb as a box, like rocks. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, but that's why I kind of limit how many of those I read. But the ones that I have picked up have mostly been very, very young feel. Like, the girls are talking about stuff that I would be hyper focused on in high school, but as somebody who is like 21 plus, I wouldn't really care about. They are kind of still in that space of like the naiveness, like I said, of it all, like that you have because of youth, but their life experiences dictate that they shouldn't really be moving like that. They should be a little bit smarter. And like, to be honest, it's just like the writing to find that with some of the YA fantasies, like they lean more into that flower language, like very like purple prose type descriptions of everything that I see a little bit less of in adult. But then when I pick up those fantasies, it's like hard to differentiate whether like them between what's being published as a romantasy and what's being published as adult romantasy, other than the author telling me the ages. Like a lot of line towing. You have like characters that are very seductive, like sirens and vampires, and authors kind of like in line seeing how much like sexiness that they can pull off in their book. I see a lot of fan art where it's very voluptuous bodies of these girls. Again, I'm not saying that a girl can't wear a nice dress, but I'm saying if the focal point of your fan art for your main character is like how much leg and cleavage she's showing, it does kind of feel a little weird for me. At least sometimes I'm just like, okay, but why does she have to look like a grown woman in the fan art? So those are just my thoughts about like the whole YA with spice conversation. I really do think that while it's okay to read some YA books, that we still need to remember that it's a space for the teen readers, and to let them be at the forefront. They should be the ones shouting about it like the loudest online. They should feel free to be able to make ever content without like adults trying to like come into their space. We have adult books that we can be shouting about. We shouldn't be trying to push our expectations as adults onto these YA books. Like, support some of the more adult books that are targeted towards your age range. Like I said, we've definitely gotten a lot more. So like the excuses of, well, it's not really out there, I don't see the publisher promoting it. If you're not finding like it because the publisher is not directly telling you, it's time to do a little bit of research. We all have access to Google. We can ask around to different influencers. There are various people who are always online talking about books. You can ask your librarian. Like, you have to seek out what you want to see and then actually put your money where your mouth is and buy the types of books that you want to see more of on the shelves, rather than just demanding YA like fits that mold. And I think a lot of authors are realizing now, because YA is so oversaturated, that like they don't need to go the YA route either to break into publishing, because that was a big thing before, where you had like, you were being told, especially like as an author of color, like, oh well, YA is the only space for us. I think in the past 5 years that's changed, and there's a lot more opportunity for adult stories, and you really do need to look at your story when you're starting to like draft it and be like, where does it belong? So let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. If you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!